Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to introduce you to a woman that you need to know. This is Cait Howard. We met originally. Cait was a podcast manager for a common client. We were working together, and she is now running a full-time business mentoring mamas and other business professionals and running a podcast agency. And she is the mom to two beautiful girls. So I wanted to introduce you. So Cait, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, and how you got started.
Yeah. So, I'm live in Nashville with my husband, Philip, and our two girls. So we were born and raised here. So before the big like Nashville influx happened, but, and my husband and I actually run the agency together. He works with me in that. So, and I can talk more about that too, that part of the journey. But, basically my journey to where I'm at now started in 2013 in my first corporate job out of grad school. And I remember I was driving to work one day and I was like, is this all there is? Like, is this all there is? Like you go to work, you do a job that like, it's fine. Like it pays the bills kind of, but like, is that, all there is? And I remember it was the first realization of like, what else is out there? Like, is there a different path other than like going to school and getting a corporate job and doing this for the rest of your life? And also at the time, like I needed to make more money. Like I was barely making ends meet with the salary that they were paying me. And the girl that I worked with, she was actually working in retail at nights to make extra money to pay her bills. And I was like, well, I don't really want to like go to another job. Like I still want to, have like work-life balance. And so I Googled, how to start a business from home or how to make extra money from home or something like that. And like the rest is history. I found the very first podcast I found, which is really interesting now that I work on podcasts because podcasts basically changed my life. But the first podcast I found was Smart Passive Income by Pat Flynn, who just interviewed people doing different businesses. And two women came on and were talking about their business. They did an Etsy shop and they were also helping other moms grow Etsy shops at the time. And I was like, oh, that sounds fun. Like I, have all these creative ideas and like whatever, like 35% crafty, but like not all the way there. Like I could do some things, but I'm not like, I don't know. When I think of like crafty people who are like super creative, I'm not super creative, but I am strategic. So I was like, I could figure this out. I could do this and I can make some extra money. Well, I started my first Etsy shop and I was like, okay, this is not like, first of all, I do not have the space for all this inventory. Second of all, I do not want to make products and like ship them out all the time. Like I was just like, yeah, like I was making extra money, but it wasn't like, a lot. And then on top of that, like had like the actual creating the product, shipping the product, all of that. I didn't love that. But what I did love was
what
like,
were you selling?
I was selling custom vinyl decals. So yeah. So
Yeah.
I got like a silhouette and, just that was in that time, so this is 2013, it was very popular.
Yes.
So, I was like, okay, yeah, I could like get into this. And so it was started just, like monograms, like things like that. And eventually like I even started making like coffee mugs, which I still love this. And they're still, this is still a passion of mine, but I made mugs with like CEO on it and like, all like just fun, like business type, like fun products for women in business. And so, but yeah, so I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. So, from there I was like, nope, not going to happen, at least to grow it. But at the time it was almost like that experience that like opened the door to me seeing like what was possible. And what I did love about what I was doing was marketing and, figuring out systems and, putting together, like, how to get customers, like how to do SEO, like all of those pieces of it. Like, that's what I loved, like figuring out how to build a website. And so I was like, okay, something's here. It opened these doors to realize like, there are so many people out here, like doing things that I've never even heard of. Like they're literally like taking things they're passionate about and making money out of it. Like I discovered the Amy Porterfields of the world, the Jenna Kutchers of the world, right? Like once that door opened, I realized like there's an entire like industry that I never knew about. And so from there, I just started getting my feet wet and dipping my toes into taking kind of what I did in corporate and the skills that I cultivated through that Etsy shop and started offering it to other online business owners, women who I had been connecting with. So offering VA type work, offering online business manager type work behind the scenes for them. And then in 2018, one of the OBM clients I was working with had a podcast. And at the time her editor left and she needed support. And my husband is an audio engineer. He mixes and masters music. That was his background. And I was like, well, I mean, podcasting is still, audio. I think he could help. I think we could, support you with this. And we did. We started supporting her with that. I took on kind of the back end operations of it. He took on like the audio piece of it. And I was like, wow, I really like this. I have obviously been an avid podcast listener. And so I loved podcasts and I loved learning the behind the scenes of it and how to make it happen. So I just reached out to my network and was like, hey, I think we're thinking about offering this as a service. If you need it or someone that does, let us know. And that's how we got our first client after that, our first launch client. And then from there, we grew from referrals at that point. So essentially just, people we would work with to launch, other people would ask them, hey, like, I want to start a podcast. How did you do it? And they would refer us to them. And so then over the next 3 years, we just worked off of referrals. The end of 2020, I decided, okay, like this is working. This is something that I enjoy. So I think I'm going to go all in on it, and really pivoted like social media, really started talking about it more and building connections and just kind of creating a name for myself in the podcast space of being a podcast expert. And when someone thought of podcasting, like they would think of me. And again, started to grow a little bit more rapidly until about 2021. Around March, I realized, okay, this is at a point where I cannot continue to work in my corporate job. So this entire time I'm in a corporate job, I'm working in healthcare, and things were going to a point where I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to make a choice. And I did. So in June, I left my corporate job to focus on the business full time. At that point, I had replaced my corporate salary. At the beginning of 2021, Philip and I sat down and said, here are like the milestones we want to reach. We want to meet, and then, I'll be ready to make that leap. And so June was when I finally stepped away and started focusing full time. By August, we realized, okay, we're continuing to grow really fast and we need more support. And so it was a matter of we can outsource more, or we can bring Philip home and he can support more than what he's doing. So we also brought him home from his teaching job in August. So then from there, we just, we're kind of where we're at now, where the agency is continuing to grow. I am now shifting a little bit more to focus in on business mentoring and working with women who are also in corporate, who want to create an income on their own terms and do those types of things. That's kind of where my heart and passion is as well. So I've started to focus on that a little more while continuing to grow our agency. And our agency, specifically works with women entrepreneurs. We aren't doing like crime podcasts, which my husband would love to do that because he's obsessed with crime podcasts, but we are doing hobby podcasts. But what we do, we work with female entrepreneurs because that's my background, right? Like being a VA, being an OBM, working in systems and businesses for female entrepreneurs. I know so much of those back end pieces. And so my goal with working with the women that I work with is that podcasting is being used as an asset for their business. And it's a lead generator. And not so much a lead generator, because podcasts aren't necessarily going to, attract leads as much as they are going to cultivate that relationship from turning people who are following you like on Instagram into leads. So because you're cultivating that know, like, and trust through your podcast. So that's my goal with our agency, is to really cultivate that with the women that we work with. And it's been, honestly couldn't ask for anything more perfect as far as just the women that I work with and what I'm able to help them do. And what it means for me there, as far as it meets the passion I have, and while also meeting an expertise I have. So yeah, that was a little bit long-winded, but that's how it started.
You're fucking amazing. Your story, I am blown away. What is it when you first started? How did you find your first few clients? I know that you said that you were kind of tapping into people that you had been connecting with, but what did that actually look like? How did you find that first client and kind of reach out to make that connection of actually working for them?
Yeah. So it honestly was sort of for me, it felt just like it was parallel happening at the same time. Like it happened when it was supposed to happen, because at the time, I was working with, my very first client, Allie Reeves, and I was working with her as she was my coach. I was working with her with business coaching, because at the time I knew like, I want to be doing something. I know that I want to build a business, and I know I want to do that on my own and leave corporate, but I'm just trying to figure out all the pieces. And at the time, she had really built something from pivoting from being a social media manager to doing something more like coaching, mentoring. And so I wanted to learn from her. So when I was working with her as a coach, I kind of let her know about this idea, and she was like, I want to launch a podcast. Can you help me? And I was like, well, sure. Yeah. Like we can, we'll figure it out. And so from there, she was my very first client. And because she was in this realm, and because she worked with clients too through coaching, they wanted to start podcasts. And so I was her first referral. And then from there, the network grew, because then they had networks that they referred me to. So it was really just that common person that I was working with, that started it all. And then just continuing to network and build connections in order to just get my name out there that this is what I do, but also delivering really great client experience. I mean, that's something that I've really focused on, and that I continue to focus on, that sets me apart. And that, because then like, you'll see people rave about us and they talk about me and my services and what I do. And that's because I've focused on the experience. And so delivering such a great experience that it's like a no-brainer to work with me to do these things. So I think having that, really focusing on connections, but then focusing on that client experience, so that it was a no-brainer for them to refer us.
What's so interesting is I know you from behind the scenes, and something that I tell people all the time, because I refer you, you're like my number one podcast expert referral, is that you don't just build and manage podcasts. You are so strategic in your recommendations to clients. Here's how to leverage this. Here's how to use this. Here are recommendations. Can you tell me a little bit and share with everyone what is the difference between being strategic with a freebie or a tool like podcasting, and how that could impact your business versus just putting one out there into the world?
Yeah. So for me, the biggest difference I see and where I work with people is that that there's a purpose behind what you're doing on the podcast, right? So that you think of it as really helping solidify like a client journey, that just like you would on social media. I mean, this is what's preached in content on social media, that you think of what your brand pillars are and what are the things that you want to be known for, and what are the things that you want people to know that you're an expert in, and use your podcast in that way. So you're building that, but also that when people come to listen, that you are giving them the next step, so that you're saying like, hey, here's this content, but I've also created this free guide or whatever it is for you to consume and for you to do, so that you're then connecting with them outside of the podcast, that you are asking. This is sometimes what I see people do. They don't ask for like engagement, literally on your podcast, ask for people to come DM you, like say, hey, if this is something you're experiencing too, like come DM me. Like I want to talk to you about it, because you're taking that relationship, and these are people that are obviously getting to know you and like you. So when you're bringing them into a different sphere, whether that's email marketing or coming into your DMs, you can continue to cultivate that relationship with them. So really using it as a place to build expertise, to build connection, and really see it as long form legacy content, because where social media is going to be, quicker, and, stories only live so long, posts only live so long, your captions are only so long, you can only do so much, and no one really wants to watch 30 story slides. So to use podcasting as that long form content where you are able to really dive deep and dig in, and then like getting your juice out of it. So what I see a big mistake is people will just like add a podcast into their business model, and then they see it as just something extra they have to do. And so they struggle with creating content. They struggle with creating episodes, because now there's this whole other beast, like on top of everything they're trying to do. So rather than adding it in as something else, using it as the top of everything that you're doing underneath. And so everything drives from that. So the content you're creating that week on social media drives from the podcast content. The things that you're selling in your business, the things that you're launching, you're planning your podcast, you're strategically positioning yourself for those launches. Your emails, you're able to repurpose things from the podcast into those. So really using show notes from a podcast to put on a blog so you can start utilizing SEO rather than having to create blog posts. So really getting the juice out of the content you're creating it and seeing it as like that top level versus just another thing like added in. Because when it is that, then that's when it's really hard to stay consistent and hard to create the content with it because it just feels like something extra.
I love that. You're speaking my love language with the strategy because nothing kills me more, especially right now in the age of TikToks and going viral with reels. Everyone wants to go viral, but they have no plan in place for what to do with all those new followers and all those new views. So that, girl, love language right there. So another question for you. Right now, it feels like everyone has a podcast. Everyone's doing a podcast. You go online, you try to search for, is this name available? There's 10 of them already there. What's your recommendation for someone who wants to start a podcast, but they don't want to just get lost in a Spotify search bar? They want to stand out. They don't want to just be another podcast. What would be your recommendation for them?
So my biggest recommendation would be to really get clear on like getting specific with your podcast and who it's serving. Because from the perspective of podcast growth, the biggest way you're going to grow is it's really word of mouth. So it's really unsexy and, podcast growth, you can run ads to podcasts just like anything else, but what really grows podcasts is when you are delivering value in each episode and mini transformations in each episode that people can't help but go recommend it and go share it in their stories because they're getting something from it. So creating, again, if you're using it as a part of your business, then really creating episodes that are actionable that people are going to get mini transformations from and being really specific about who your podcast is for so that they know like, okay, if your podcast is for, web designers, or let's say, brand new web designers, then if I'm a brand new web designer and I can listen to that podcast and I also have lots of friends that are brand new web designers, well, I'm going to know I need to refer you to all my other brand new web designer friends because you have exactly what they need too. So being really specific about who you're serving, I think is going to be the biggest thing that can set you apart in this day and age, not just having a general marketing podcast, not just having a general, online business podcast, but really honing in on something specific. And I know, again, the fear with that comes with everything else as far as like, well, what if I run out of content? Like if I'm so specific, like, can I run out of content? And in that case, that's something I tell people to think about before they ever start. Like, brainstorm 52 ideas, content ideas. Like if you can't come up with 52 ideas for like a weekly podcast, then that might not be the right topic. So it's a marriage of like being specific enough to speak to one person while also being able to, still have enough content to create something that's going to be long lasting, because with podcasting, it's consistency over time that is going to have the biggest impact. But I've also known people to have a podcast for specific purposes, right? So their intention is to never have a podcast that goes on and on and on forever. They have a podcast for a concrete number of episodes that is meant to bring their listeners in on a journey with them. And that podcast always lives and is there, but it's specifically for something like that versus they just always want to have an ongoing podcast.
So like a limited series, but very intentional and specific.
Yeah.
Damn, that's smart. That's super smart. So for someone who is just getting started, wants to DIY a podcast by themselves, do you have resources, tools? Like what do you recommend for people just getting started?
Yeah. So Google's your best friend. You can 1000% Google everything you need to know to start a podcast. You can YouTube it. All the main podcast hosts, Libsyn, Buzzsprout, they all have how-to guides on how to get started. I created my own guide that basically, after I launched, dozens of podcasts that I put together and said, here's the process that I go through with every single person. I put that together with like how-to tutorials on how to put episodes together, how to edit your episodes, like some of those basic things that you need to know to get started. And I packaged that together for $27 for anyone that wants to launch a podcast. And I've had multiple people take it and launch their podcast and they love it. And it's been a really great resource for them. I think what makes it a little bit different than maybe what you find in your Google searches is I've just kind of consolidated everything for you. Like here are the main things you need to focus on. And I explain it really easily so that you know exactly how to do it. And so that's available and it's called Launch Your Podcast in 7 Days Roadmap. So that's available for someone who wants to get started on their own. And then
we'll link that in the email if you can send that with me. Perfect.
Yep. Perfect. Yep. I will do that. And then the other way to work with us is done for you. So we launch podcasts for women entrepreneurs as well as then provide the ongoing management. And what that looks like is basically they record their audio and we handle everything else. So they send it over to us. We do all the editing, the mastering, which makes that sound really good. And then putting that into the host to publish, as well as supporting some of those assets around the podcast, like social media, show notes, blog post creation. We now do YouTube video management as well with our podcast clients, as well as just as a separate arm, because when my husband came home, he's an expert in video editing as well. So we added that in, and a lot of podcasters are focusing on utilizing some video components from their podcast to use on social media like Reels and IGTV. So we offer that as well. So really trying to support people who are doing podcasts, if it is in their budget and if it is something they want support with, to take off as much of that repurposing off of them so that they are getting the juice, but they aren't having to spend all their time doing it.
I love that. You're so brilliant. You're so brilliant. I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited that you went for it and you and Phil are doing this full time yourselves, the husband and wife team. Where can people find you and find out more about you?
Yeah. So Instagram is probably the best place. Cait Rose Co. And then you can also visit our website, caitroseco.com.
Awesome. Well, Cait, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of your expertise about podcasting and business. If you want access to any of these resources, I'm going to link them in the email. So make sure to check Cait out, and we will see you soon.
Bye.